And of course, look at our rand. It's weak at the moment.
Yes.
It's basically around 19 against the US dollar. When we import products, because we're buying products which are dollar denominated, we have to give up more rand to get $1. So therefore, when we have to give up more rand to get the $1 to purchase the dollar denominated good, it costs us more. And then that's when you get what we call imported inflation. And when you get imported inflation, it means people then have to pass the cost on around the economy. So for these tariffs for South Africa kick in on the 9th of April. So the proof will be in the eating in terms of what kind of impact that's going to have on our exporting industries. We know that the 25% on automobiles has already started, and that's going to hit the guys in the Eastern Cape and other areas that produce cars.
And we already saw some plants already shutting down.
The tariffs are going to go up and people have to pass on the additional cost to the consumer. It means the consumer is going to be paying more. Now, if the consumer pays more, that means that inflation is going to rise. It's going to change the approach of monetary policy. And then there'll be a question around, do I really need this product? And some people will start adjusting what they buy.
True.
And they may decide they're not going to buy certain goods. And if you have a mass of people who make that decision about certain goods, the producers of those certain goods are going to be hit hard because people can't take the increases that are coming through in terms of price.
Considering the fact that we are about to have a VAT increase in the country, how does this also then play into the grander scheme of things?
Yeah, in the South African context.
Guys, if you're a lover of South Africa, you really have to watch this video to the end, because I've never really seen any analyst in South Africa really break down the details of the consequences of Donald Trump's increased tariffs on South Africa. And also today we also learn now that China has actually slapped the US with a 34% tariff on US goods, I think, entering into China. And so we've seen that the trade wars in the world have actually just begun. And I've never really seen any analysts analyze the implications of these trade wars on South Africa more than this SABC economic analyst Nompumelelo. I think it's a really fantastic analysis, because, you know, many of us just think that this whole thing with tariffs, we really understand, you know, and all of that. But in this video here, she's breaking down the details on how it affects, how it comes down to the ordinary South African, the consumer. I think she even argues that, you know, plants, especially automobile plants in the Eastern Cape, are actually already shutting down because of this increased 30%, VAT hike, I think, as it hits South Africa. She also explains how, you know, that the whole thing actually would now hit to the consumer, because at the end of the day, this whole increases in tariffs, first of all, it hits the exporter the most, all right? Now, the exporter would now have to really think about how he adds all those costs. And then the importer of South Africa's goods in the US will now have to factor in the payment of the 30% increases in the price that has been slammed on South Africa's goods, you know, and how much of that would actually be hitting the US consumer. Now, it only takes a little time, or, you know, just a period of time before the US consumer then thinks and starts thinking and wondering if they really need this product or not. At the end of the day, we see a slowdown in the importation of goods coming from South Africa. At the end of the day, we then see a slowdown in the production of goods in South Africa, because there will be a kind of like argument that probably this is a waste of our time, that these goods are not actually getting into the US market, and knowing fully well that AGOA, which was actually allowed, South African goods get into US market tariff free, that is actually not happening anymore. And so at the end of the day, we see a really massive hit at the consumer, both at the US side, but also more on the South African side, because now we see that this 0.5% VAT increase might be adding to the problems that South African consumers might actually have to be bearing in light of this whole trade wars now, with China slapping US with the 34% trade wars. And Donald Trump really is not resisting or backing down. He actually, I think in the video I saw recently, he actually says, okay, now it has been done. The operation has been done, kind of like a surgery has been done, and let that sink into the whole world. And how this whole thing hits South Africa, bro, I think it's really intense. But let's quickly listen to Nompumelelo actually break down for us the details. Really, really important video, guys. I really admonish you guys to watch to the end, because it really explains how probably the South African consumer should get ready and probably make moves tariffs in the future, so that this whole thing probably doesn't hit as much as it has been planned to hit the basic South African consumer. And share your thoughts, guys, in the comments.
So let's start with this. I mean, markets are all down. Talk to us about some of the key drivers. As we understand, there's been retaliation now from other nations that were slapped with these increases.
Yeah, so it's quite hectic, if I can be South African about it and say it's quite hectic, because that was what was feared the most, that there were going to be retaliatory tariffs. So the US has taken the first swipe, and now China, the second largest economy, has said, right, back at you, we're going to charge you 34% in terms of import tariffs. And of course, Canada as well, which is a significant neighboring partner to the United States, they've said, bring it on, we will also retaliate. So it's a retaliation game. We keep on saying an impending trade war. The trade war is pretty much here, because those are the significant economies, and it's going to have ripple effects. People talk about the dislocation of supply chains. It's going to make it more expensive, and who's going to be hit quite significantly is the exporter, because the exporter now exports, right?
Yes.
And they have their price, they factor in their costs in there, then they send it to the destination. Then that destination adds whatever. So for example, with South Africa, the United States will add 30% to the price of whatever good there is in order for it to get over the hurdle. The importer in the United States will then pay that 30%, and then will have to pass that 30% on to the consumer. Now, the question is, to what extent will the consumer bear that 30% increase? To what extent will the importer be able to pass less of an increase in order for that good to still be attractive? These are things that are still yet to play out. Apparently, these tariffs for South Africa kick in on the 9th of April. So the proof will be in the eating in terms of what kind of impact that's going to have on our exporting industries. We know that the 25% on automobiles has already started, and that's going to hit the guys in the Eastern Cape and other areas that produce cars.
And we already saw some plants already shutting down in the previous 2 years. So talk to us about what we're currently seeing right now, Nompo, because I'd like to just get an update of what we're seeing on the markets at
so
this stage.
the US market, the New York Stock Exchange, has not long opened, and we saw that it opened. We see that it's down by about 2.7%. We looked at what are called US futures, where we're able to anticipate how a market is going to open, and it was largely anticipated that we would see US markets open in negative territory. So they are down, and they also closed in negative territory yesterday, very sharply indeed. The tech-heavy NASDAQ closed basically by 6%. The S&P 500 closed around 5%. And the Dow Jones closed down near 4%. So massive, in terms of market valuations, this is a lot of money. I mean, I heard from a colleague who was looking at the Apple share, for example, that it had lost a market capitalization of over $300 billion US.
That is hectic.
One company, $300 billion US. We're talking about big numbers here. And it's of course very negative indeed. It means that people who are invested in the market, they have less value. Pension funds are going to be affected because those funds are going to go down in value. Is this a blip? I don't know. This is a fundamental shift in the global trading economy, and now you've got these retaliations taking place. South Africa has come on record to say that it's going to explore diplomatic channels and so on.
Yes.
You know, but we only account...
How does that, assist us, Nompumelelo? Because I suppose you were talking earlier on about how the consumers or the exporters are going to be to bear the brunt of these new tariffs, because I suppose inflation is also going to be driven up.
Well, exactly. I mean, if the tariffs are going to go up and people have to pass on the additional cost to the consumer, it means the consumer is going to be paying more. Now, if the consumer pays more, that means that inflation is going to rise. It's going to change the approach of monetary policy. And then there'll be a question around, do I really need this product? And some people will start adjusting what they buy.
True.
And they may decide they're not going to buy certain goods. And if you have a mass of people who make that decision about certain goods, the producers of those certain goods are going to be hit hard because people can't take the increases that are coming through in terms of price. But in terms of, globally what it means that everyone is going to lose, even the people who've propagated this thing, which is the United States.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the US consumer is going to be hit hard because they're the ones who have to take on the increase in the import tariffs that they need to pay.
So at this stage, what can South Africa do? Because obviously those diplomatic talks are not going to get us out of this quagmire.
Listen, I am not confident about that, more so because it was different a couple of weeks ago where we felt as South Africa like, we were being targeted by the United States. Maybe we could talk to them. This guy, he's decided to just
blanket tariff,
he's decided to do this tariff thing. Yes, he's got different tariffs for different places and for different trading partners, but at the end of the day, he's made this decision. Even against Europe, his import tariffs are 20%, and the European Union has come out and said this is very negative, very negative. So it's like I don't see. Even I heard that Lesotho, shame, they've been imposed with a 50% import tariff
that he didn't know about a couple of weeks ago.
He didn't know the country existed, but I understand that they're also sending a delegation. It's pointless. I mean, I think that this is my opinion.
We are past diplomatic
engagements. They're not even going to entertain it because can you imagine if everybody is trying to appeal? Unless they decide to have a second heart or a second thought about it to say, maybe let's go back to the drawing board. But of course, that would mean losing face. So they've decided to roll this dice. We need to see where it takes us.
And maybe, Nompo, this is a backhanded question. I mean, considering the fact that we're about to have a VAT increase in the country, how does this also then play into the grander scheme of things?
Yeah, in the South African context, that's another cost, isn't it? It's a layer of cost. So we're going to have to, all the prices of the goods and services that we
Everything is going to shoot up.
Everything's going to go up, right? Yes, it's a lesser margin than 2%, 2 percentage points increase, but it's still an increase. And then you've got the general dynamics of, supply and demand. And of course, look at our rand. It's weak at the moment.
Yes.
It's basically around 19 against the US dollar. When we have a weak dollar, when we import products, because we're buying products which are dollar denominated, we have to give up more rand to get $1. So therefore, when we have to give up more rand to get the $1 to purchase the dollar-denominated good, it costs us more. And then that's when you get what we call imported inflation. And when you get imported inflation, it means people then have to pass the cost on around the economy. So, for example, we are lucky in the sense that the oil price has come down by about $5 or so. For now. Exactly, because that moves all the time. So it's come down, so that's a benefit for us. But our local currency has weakened quite sharply. So I'm not quite sure, net, whether we're going to be paying more or less at the pumps. But at the end of the day, the weakness of the currency, which doesn't look like it's going to abate anytime soon because of all the global issues, as well as some local issues as well, it's not going to benefit from us from an inflation perspective. And we know he's very strict about, inflation risks.
Nompumelelo, painting us a very gloomy picture right there. That is SABC News markets reporter.